I think what's complicated about this onboarding is when are you offboarded? To me, it's always been easy to kind of get in the sense that both people have to understand it. That there are in many cases maybe that the person who is inviting person already feels that the person who joined in the meeting are onboarded, I'm down here, where the other side who joined in doesn't feel onboarded. So it has to be a mutual, but where the offboarding never really happens because it's usually not made explicit. So and like Peter mentioned, like things can change. So if you are not here in 2 months and you come back, and you kind of feel like I'm still on board and I didn't go. I just took another project meanwhile. But the system has changed, so there might be people who are understanding. So having like what Nick mentioned, like systems and system thinking behind it is what the default, the core contributors rules we have, so that there is some kind of like standards that everybody has agreed to what is meaning of onboarding. So when we are talking about onboarding, we have actually some story behind it, what it means to be onboarded by a system. And always they're gonna be like open-ended, like, or human intervention. Like there are automation and there are human intervention. That's so onboarding to me.
Wonderful, thanks. I'd like to capture some of this. This is a tool. You might have used it before. It should be dead easy to use. There we go. Scan the QR code or go to menti.com, put that code in at the top. Got a few of these. It's kind of data collection thing, but also an opportunity for us to just drive some conversation. This is a kind of word cloud, so it's not great for long responses. We've got some other opportunities to capture longer responses later on. We can be pretty responsive with this. I can make new questions if they find them useful, but yeah, ditch some words in there that make sense and we can use them to jump off a discussion.
Nick, just really quickly before you're going on, because we just
Yes.
started a new recording, could you give a tiny bit of context for the people that are gonna watching, for the people that will be watching this as a recording only and they don't have context? Could you just give them
Absolutely.
like a 20-second context on what we're doing here?
So for those people who've just joined, we're exploring SingularityNET as an organization. And the process we're doing is looking at how to drive the decentralization as part of the Blueprint project. And we're doing an analysis of onboarding as a system or an operation within SingularityNET that's going to be a prime driver of decentralization. So we're diving into onboarding as a concept. We're looking at where the ambassadors fit in to this piece. And yeah, we're looking about how to make that system better, what support's needed, and yeah, a kind of analysis, coming up with some ideas for how we can reduce the onboarding process and make everything a little bit better. Hope that helps. Good, some good words coming in. Give everyone a little bit more time. We can start talking about these. If anyone wants to jump in with a word that resonates from this group, feel free to do so. If you put a word up there, means particularly meaningful to you, please jump on.
One that I'm not seeing that is really meaningful to me is context. Is this idea of how much context does each person have of what's going on? And you could call it knowledge of the organization and so on, but knowledge feels a little bit more permanent, while context is situational.
Yes. Yeah, context is all important. And I think, so what do we mean? So how would context play into onboarding, do we think? So getting people aware of context of the organization. Yeah. So yeah, context particularly important in AI, in fact. It is what drives everything. So yeah, how do we, and as someone who's recently just essentially walked through the door of SingularityNET, the context here is rich. There's absolutely huge amounts of rich context, lore, backstory, legacy, technology. It's got its own language in many cases. I'm going to add context there. I think someone mentioned it being a kind of journey and not knowing when it stopped earlier, which I thought was really nice. That's certainly something that's playing into the sort of line I'm going to. So I've added context and a journey to there. Mentorship, I really like. And that particularly plays into a kind of role there, which might be something that we want to pick up later in the conversation here. But yes, it's a journey. It's one in which, in complex organizations, onboarding is essentially, at what point does it stop? Has anyone got any thoughts? At what point does the onboarding process stop? At what level would you say?
I said it in the chat really, but I don't think it does. I don't
Yes.
think there's a point at which you say, I am onboarded. It's like there's layers. You might get to, yeah, I'm onboarded to this level, but then there's another level to go deep.
Yes, there's layers to it. Tommy.
Yeah, Nick, great presentation, great beginning. I think I have to, in a way, I have to agree with Daniel, what he was saying, and I will question it also. In context of onboarding, exactly what are you exploring? Is it onboarding to SingularityNET ecos? Is it onboarding to deep funding? Is it onboarding to the ambassador program? I know is one of the first. We didn't have onboarding. We stumbled in and we walked around in a dark room feeling our way. Today, I found out about some NFTs, and I am a degen besides being an AI guy, and I just bought some tarot cards for Sophia Verse or Singularity. I never heard of them until I saw Peter's post yesterday. So the context is onboarding to what? And to what level? Is it tilling on a device for a system that may help AI communicate? And I think it's like layers of an onion. How do you peel it? And some people just want to buy AGIX or RJV or CGV, and they want to get a 5-bagger out of it. So are you talking to the ambassadors specifically on onboarding? Or are you talking to people that are involved in the organization saying onboarding? Because I just came back from BGI. I have a whole different picture now. So the context is what are we talking about, really?
Yes. So I'm going to, you've rather astutely figured out largely where I'm going. Now I'm going to share this model with you of where my sort of head is at with this. So you should be able to see a Google Sheet here. And you're quite right. It's layers, and there's layers within layers. And one of the things I would like for us to achieve today is to start to unpack what those layers are. Where does it go? So I hinted to this in the starting presentation, but I think there's broad categories. I've called them major sections of the onboarding. Now, for me, on that question of when did you stop onboarding, it's probably at some point in the future where you're working on OpenCog in some meaningful manner, right? And that could be working on the ethics of, or the kind of social layer of that process. But ultimately, our goal here is to end up with an AI ecosystem that's decentralized and controlled by the people. So I'm actually completely agree with Vanessa so far. I don't think the process is going to stop anytime soon. But what is it? So I've largely split this into a few layers. And you're quite rightly there, Tommy, pulled up. There's like essentially token holders who are just there to buy some tokens, right? That's pretty much all they're after it for. And I've called these peripheral participants, or rather a class of people. It's actually inspired by a bit of learning theory, but largely it's the idea that people can be part of a community and be legitimate peripheral participants. They're there, they're real people, part of the organization, they're part of the network, and we should find ways to make them feel a sense of belonging, regardless of their peripheral participation. That's cool. If you want to stay as a passive token holder, you're just here for a token, to hold the token for a bit. You've bought the token, so you've contributed to the ecosystem in some way for that time. Now, obviously, we're looking for a deeper level of onboarding. So peripheral participants, and this is a sketch. What I'm quite keen for us to dive into is what are the additional layers. So let's just spend a bit of time on these peripheral participants so you can see where I'm going with this. I think this starts at token holders. Token holders buy a token, and I think there's even grades within that. There's people who are holding a token in an exchange. It's just one of the many other tokens they've picked up on Binance or whatever. And then there's people who are a little bit deeper who actually holding the token in a self-custodied wallet. They're on chain at that point, right? So there's a level of passive token holder that's a little bit deeper. Then I've created a class I call interested token holders. And these are the people who are holding the token. They're interested enough to follow the X accounts and the LinkedIn accounts. They might even engage with posts going a little bit deeper. They're watching the YouTube videos, or even they're reading those rather lengthy Medium posts that come out periodically that have all the complex detail of how the ecosystem is developing. Going further a little bit, I still think these are peripheral participants, but they're the token crowd who are actually participating in some of the what I call active token holder activities. So they're bridging between Cardano and Ethereum. They're staking tokens. They're one of the loyalty program members. They have voted in the ecosystem, and they're an active voter in the ecosystem. So how does that feel as a structure? Do we agree that this is the sort of the moment that people are participants in the network? Can anyone think of any others that should go into there? Walter.
Well, personally, I don't view tokens as having anything to do with community. Myself, the only tokens I hold in Cardano, HJX, are the ones I've somehow been granted because, for investment reasons, I invest otherwise. And so this perspective has shifted a while back, where the initial council documents did call out for the community as token holders, and that's been dropped for quite some time now. So I would strike that entirely, particularly since this is an AI-oriented environment. So it's research, building, and so on. And until such time that all the governance is heavily, tied around token-based, there is really no connection.
Any other thoughts on that? Anyone? Vanessa? Daniel?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if these layers are kind of based on research, because I do see quite a lot of things where you've defined what each level does, like follows X, LinkedIn, Exchange, all those things. I can see a lot of people who are at higher or more involved levels who don't do those things particularly. And I'm just wondering, has it come from actually researching what people do and what their progress is to get to a certain level? Because I think if it's just based on kind of what you would think somebody at that level would be doing, I think you might be getting it a bit wrong because I don't think there's a progression. Like I said in the chat, it's a bit like history. It's not a straightforward progression from, I don't know, less rights to more rights or a worse life to a better life. It's more muddled than that.
It's a non-linear process for sure. And to answer your question, a starting research, this is the research. I'm here to ask you your thoughts on this. It is non-linear. There's definitely people who aren't. There's people who are perhaps deeper who don't even hold tokens, right? There might be people who are in what I consider the building layer. And the way I'm phrase this is, we know these people are there. To answer the first point, these token holders, we can draw the line, and I think that's a conversation that we can have. And sounds like this, we've already made that decision, perhaps, as not community members, but they are on the periphery. They are potential engaged members that our goal is to onboard them further into the ecosystem. So I'm perfectly happy, and it's like essentially down to the Supervisory Council on sort of where we draw these boundaries. But certainly I looked earlier, there's 87,000 token holders on the Ethereum. Couldn't really find the Cardano holders, but you're looking at 150,000+ people there who are on the periphery, who have the potential to be further
I'm
in.
not denying that these are roles. I'm just saying that maybe it's not a kind of hierarchical structure.
It's not linear.
Like
I totally agree.
You know, and they cross between each other.
They are. I think there is a general progression that I think this is why if you look at the higher order roles here, this is why it's designed to be. I think you've got peripheral participants, those who don't engage, and then you've got engaged participants, and that you're here, right? So this group is engaged participants. One of the things I wanted to unpick there is what is the grades of participants. I think you've got the people chatting away in Telegram and Discord. They're engaging, but it's surface level engagement, right? So then we've got, town halls, things like this, obviously more deeper engaged. And then there's the ambassador program. What is the engagement layer in there? So really at this point, I wanted to just surface this at the moment, and then we'll dip in some of the questions. Daniel.
Thinking maybe about like building on Walter's comments, maybe the term token holders is a little bit limiting. Like if we think about contribution, it could be financial contribution of buying the token, or some sort of more passive contribution like retweeting. That is still very peripheral, low context sort of action, that like very small actions that someone can take, but that start to get them further acquainted with the whole system. So that was one point. The other one is building upon the comments that who was it? I think Tommy was talking about, of like onboarding into what. I'm wondering, and this is a question for everyone, but does it feel right to, if we think about the marketing funnel, usually starts very big and then becomes kind of narrower. While here is perhaps more the opposite. It's like at the beginning you look at the website and you learn a little bit about the whole thing, but then as you dig deeper, you discover more and more different rabbit holes, and all the different teams and all the different units and organizations and so on. So it's kind of like this expanding funnel of options at the bottom, where there is huge variety of microsystems, micro communities that each of them have their own onboarding process. Like each rabbit hole, you can get acquainted with it, or just stay at the overview level, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the goals here is to kind of chart those rabbit holes a little bit, because our goal is to get people deeper down this funnel. Thibaut, then Grace.
Regarding to me, the peripheral participants make sense. There's just so many low-hanging activities. But for like engaged participants and building, I see a bit of like misunderstanding here. For example, Telegram and Discord they are platforms that can be used totally like different ways. Some use Telegram just to read what's happening, and some people use to question, and some people actually start discussion and progress. So that I think like that function of what Telegram is used for or Discord is used for, that may then put that main Discord into different section, maybe peripheral when you just read it, engaging when you are, I don't know, voting on there, on building if you are communicating with workshop or like planning some next session or some getting some document shared.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. So yeah, platforms, I mean, it's kind of a little strange in crypto because there's the Telegram crowd and the Discord crowd, and the platform does shape the depth of engagement to some degree. But yeah, I think these are all up for grabs. What we shape these actions as, or how we chart this space is, like I said, this is just a sketch. We can go around with that. Grace.
At one of the workshops, I think it was Daniel asked people what is your onboarding thing, and actually we did that also among ourselves in SingularityNET. Like, how did you get involved? And those journeys are so different from one another that I think there's something about the peripheral participants that is less important, but like there, to me, it seems like there's like a first, and I'm just thinking about this now that you've brought it up, Nick, is there's a first grabbable action. I'm going to call it grab or onboardable action. So the first time I see you at an ambassador program, or the first time you enter the Discord, that's the first time we could grab you to onboard you. And so it kind of, I don't want to say the peripheral doesn't matter, because the peripheral is, oh, I saw a post and then I got interested and then I joined the Telegram group. And maybe there's some possible grabbable moments on LinkedIn or on X or something like that, but mostly it's like the first time that you actively did an action that I know that you're attempting to onboard yourself, that might be the first time that we can really like grab onto something and then understand how we can do something to make that person's journey better.
Yes. And largely what I'm aiming to do here is to get us to think about that journey and looking up and looking down, right? So where are we going to? So one of the things I want us to do is to dive into that ambassador layer in a minute. But let's keep going. Tommy, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I want to question and challenge a statement that you made 2 or 3 times, and it's about a goal. It seems almost that you're using an old-fashioned IRL sales funnel process of suspect, prospect, customer, client, referring client. But the statement, the goal that you stated, I think, was we want to get them more involved or deeper into the system. And I question, first off, is whose goal is that? And the second one is why would we want to do that? If you have a VC that is providing seed money, $1 million, do you really want him in a deep layer? And does he want, or she want to be onboarded, or do they just want to know what the market capitalization is in the tokenomics? So where did that goal come from?
It's literally driven by we need to decentralize, right? So you can't decentralize with 30 people, right? You need an expanded participant base in which to effectively, like, the process of decentralization is the diffusion of power. That necessarily involves the expansion of the power base, means more people with more power. So that is the process of decentralization. So that's largely the conversation I'm driving here is, yeah, now we can be very selective and build a wide net to find people, but more people is what we need to have to find. For example, the building participant layer, which we've not quite talked about yet. And these are not necessarily linear, and they may run tangentially. And think of it like snakes and ladders, where there's people where you can fast track all the way. In fact, I'm sure many people did fast track to a core participant working for the foundation without going through any of these other layers. The ideal trajectory is that people do come through all the layers and end up as a core participant, which I think is one of the things that we can do or strive for, because it's about credible decentralization, right? So credible decentralization is when someone says, is your network decentralized? And I can point to evidence to say, yes, it's not controlled by a small group of people. There is no one identifiable group that controls this thing. There is no center. So it might be desirable in some cases to keep the power centralized, but at some point, if we do want to decentralize this network in time for AGI, that does have to change. Thibaut, then Vanessa.
Regarding again the engaged participants, for me the town halls basically is a meeting. We have our sessions, so we need to have like more this stuff, and even this is like one of the maybe not called town halls, so maybe clarification, because town hall usually means that very specific point where people get together, but you can get together in workshop too, or a session, or a learning study, or a something.
That's very much what I'm looking for. That's this kind of disambiguation between these terms. I think because what we're trying to do is chart a path that would be desirable to draw people in.
Another thing here is when we differentiate the way we have, like even when we created the core participation list, not the one you're mentioning here, but for the Inside Ambassador program, the default list of people, the difference there was participation and contribution, where in here, I guess the building participants are the ones who are contributing. But in engaging, you bring up the word worker, and to me, worker already means like
builder,
like doing something that has provided an asset.
Yes, so
even
there's
though
potentially...
he may not, and I would replace a worker because, well, probably some people feel like as workers here, but we are strongly using like word like contributing and rewarding, not paying and hiring, and like so like a culture of using the word contributor instead of work can maybe be better. And I would put it under building participant.
Yes. So I can tell you where the building, I just kind of wanted to show you the sort of model here, and it is there to be challenged, and so we're doing exactly the right thing here. Yes, and so contributor is linguistically more in the direction. And this is somewhat of a challenge of, I seem to see that there's participants in the group that are here to just do some bounty work. And then there's much more deeper engaged participants, such as yourselves, who are perhaps closer to the idea of an ambassador, which is one of the things that I would like to dig into in a second. Vanessa.
Yeah, a little moment ago you said that you felt that going through these ranks is the ideal process. And I was just wondering if you could say a little bit more about why you feel that is, because it feels a bit like you're trying to look at shaping how people should onboard rather than looking at how they do onboard. And I'm particularly interested in the idea that, as has been said in the chat, people might come in because they're interested in a particular area, particularly around governance and making decisions about or being involved in decisions about how AI is used. There are people who are affected by that every day, and they're not token holders yet, and they're not going to come in by that route. I'm reminded of something that Grace was saying in a meeting a long while ago, not that long ago, about, young women or young teenage girls. They're hugely affected by what happens with AI, and they're not going to come in by the route that you're identifying. So while I think it could be a good route for some people, I don't think we should be looking at trying to dictate how people should onboard. We should be looking at how they do.
Yeah, good points. I'm I'll elaborate a little bit on what I meant. So there will be a point in the future where we'll need to justify that the system is decentralized. And one of the metrics for credible decentralization is that there is a path from, let's say, peripheral participant through to core contributor that is open to everyone, right? So the system is permeable in a sense.
Can I just ask you where that comes from when you're saying this is a definition of credible decentralization?
It comes like I talk to lawyers about this a lot. Like the definition is being formed at the moment. I spend about 20 to 30% of my time talking to lawyers and various other stakeholders about what could justify a decentralized system. So if the system is permeable, as in the system is open enough for there to be a trajectory, visible trajectory. So for example, and a piece of evidence of credible decentralization was there's a community member that made their way to being a foundation participant, of which I know there are a few and several, in fact, in this system, which is good. We want to be able to say that these were just community members joining in an open system that ultimately ended up being key power players in the system. So that trajectory of saying, here's this person coming in and moving into the center over time is good evidence of that. Does that make sense? And to a certain degree of what we're trying to do here is design those paths for people to follow.
Are people clear about why a legal definition is important?
Yeah, that is a good question.
I would say it wouldn't hurt to get a bit of more context on that, to be honest.
Yeah, so one of the contexts is, if you've ever looked at Ben's LinkedIn profile, it says benevolent dictator on it. And he doesn't have the desire to be the benevolent dictator forever. And there's reasons of legal liability on him, both as a US citizen who is a crypto founder and as somebody who we're seeing what's happening in the AI world to these guys who are in charge, who are making poor decisions and who are liable for all kinds of stuff. And so even from a personal level, if you're Ben, you might want to have a real way of saying, look, I'm not the king here. There's really a group of people there's a legal basis for saying, I didn't make these decisions all by myself. Now, of course, there's very good ethical reasons why he wants to do that. And having spent a little bit of time with him, I really am convinced he is benevolent and that he does want to decentralize power. And he does want the community to make these decisions because he knows he's like, let's be clear, he's an old white, highly educated genius. He doesn't represent the average person in the population of the world. And he does want this. But the legal definition is quite important to the foundation. And we've seen that with all kinds of legal problems, whether it's from Facebook all the way down to, crypto organizations, So that's why the legal definition is a good place to start. It's not the only definition, but it is a good place to start.
And it's not necessary. It's actually the desirable legal definition. The legal definitions are way worse. Advise you to look into MICA if you want, which is the EU regulation for decentralized technologies that's dropping. And to the letter of the law, many of the crypto projects in the space are basically now illegal, right? And one of the ways that you can fall into not illegal is that you are decentralized. And for that, you will need to prove that you are decentralized. And one of the key pieces of evidence is here's a clear trajectory from external to the system, moving through into a network and becoming a central player. It's a highly desirable feature for us to find. Daniel and Vanessa, you still get your hand up if you're more than welcome to join in after.
Yeah. What I'm sensing here is a tension between two different points of view. One which is what is the need of the organization, and another one of what is the need of the participants who are varied, and they can follow different paths, and they might want to engage more or less. So I'm wondering if perhaps a way to resolve the tension and like the different viewpoints that are coming together is suggesting this idea of onboarding with a slightly bigger scope. That is, one of the highly desirable things that onboarding can do is allow people to come all the way to the center of the system. And that's highly desirable because of the whole legal discussion we just had. But then there is other desirable things for the system to engage with participants and for participants to engage with the system, like other different forms to create value that might be more or less peripheral or might require more or less involvement. And so maybe expanding it to something around facilitating value creation and leaving that to be adjusted more dynamically. Well, at a point in time, like the most valuable thing might be getting people all the way to the center so we can prove that and be on the right side of the law. Well, at some other point, like the priorities might shift slightly, but you know, essentially having kind of like a mix of priorities there that can be adjusted dynamically.
Absolutely.
I'm curious how that lands.
Yeah, anyone would like to respond to Daniel's comment there?
It does create another difficulty because at that level, I will say then onboarding is also onboarding projects and ideas and not just people. So do we diversify from living and not living also, or we keep it?
Absolutely. So we've got deeper down this framework, we have the projects, new projects. So the building layer is largely directly from the deep funding website, the way that the overtly structuring that, which starts with voting participants, which is the community, they bleed between the layers. And then there's the ideation rounds moving into projects, which is the goal is to create at one level new AI components or new AI marketplace pieces, agents to be in the marketplace. And then we actually want more ecosystem participants, more spin-outs, if you like, or more of these projects building SingularityNET, very much part of the onboarding piece as well. Walter.
Perhaps a complementary perspective to what Daniel so eloquently expressed. So to me, what's important is to shift away from the organizational perspective as centered on the center, which is inherently centralizing, and instead to look at the trajectory of participation, and then it will become extremely obvious how an organization erects a bunch of membranes through which one, is expected to make their way. And I can vouch how predominantly it's difficult for a variety of reasons. So I think wanting, cases to demonstrate of people actually having made it is, if not even in terms of satisfying some governmental requirements, but just as a success, as a existing proof of the onboarding process is working, and not having that basically a Christmas tree pyramid, because that's what you're just taking that shape to 3 dimensions by drawing concentric spheres, instead to have the perspective of a participant going through the phases that are meaningful to them.
Yes, that's a really good point. And yeah, there is a degree of centralization to this kind of like sphere model. I see it as more diffuse than this, but there is no doubt core participants. And really our goal is to get more people into central decision-making processes. But yeah, it is the goal for many reasons. We're elevating people, we're empowering people, we're giving opportunities to people. And that's really what we're looking for. And I really like your lens on it, to take a very individual process to it. We've got about 15 minutes left. I'll show you the questions that we could dive into. I'm keen to explore, and you might have done this before, but essentially that more narrative piece is like, what got you engaged? Why are you here? We might want to do this. What I define this idea of a threshold of engagement here. You're over it. You are here. You're deeply involved in the discourse of this network. How do we get more voices here? Does anyone have any thoughts on this question? Tommy.
Yeah, many of us, you're talking to ambassadors right now, or the ambassador program. Many of us came in with little to no compensation because of altruistic reasons, AI, AGI, etc. You want to get more people in. We need a bigger budget in the ambassador program. We need to be able to put out more bounties, so to speak, or compensate people from Africa, South America, and other countries and areas, including America, England, etc. But we need to create a structure so as the people that come in that want to get engaged, want to stay engaged, know they can have some compensation. And I think that's fairly important. We have a very solid task point system that Tevo and Felix and Treasury developed, so we know how engaged people are. But the bigger budget attracts more people, worker bees or middle people, as I call them, middlers. That will help us, and it will also. We need, as ambassadors, we need to, some of us, those that want to be external, we need to be able to go to more events. There's an event in Austin. There's an event in Las Vegas in September. There's an event in Dubai coming up. We need ambassadors there to talk to people. The old-fashioned face-to-face, meet people, engage them, and expose them to BGI, AGI, and everything else. We need people on the ground. I spoke to Dr. Hansen at Panama. I had asked them to get a small Sophia so we could go to schools. They're not out yet, and I started talking to them down there, and I now have a contact. You get a little virtual Sophia, whatever, and travel and go to schools and engage people and educate them. And then have, as you're trying to develop, a pathway for them to onboard, make it easier than it was for the pioneers that came over in the Conestoga wagons, got killed or lost on the way. But there's more people to bring in. We need a bigger budget, and we need more external ambassadors within this embassy that we've built.
Excellent points, Tommy. I tried to capture some of those in our Menti here, and everyone's welcome to jump into that. Do, if you're listening in the background, drop some points in there. I agree on all points, Tommy. Tivo.
I would add something, it already covers the outreach part of it, but I would be more selective of what was started in today's call. But where is all the information, the one-stop shops? But I feel like there should be multiple one-stop shops, like with different variants. So there are those who want to engage with the system design and like understand ambassador as a whole. Then if you talk about also onboarding at the massive scale, so we have this one nice infographic about all the spin-offs that are part of the SingularityNET ecosystem. But there could be more infographics from different perspective of like what are we teaching, what kind of open sessions you can have, and like there are then different graphics are going to emerge. So I still feel like there is like a much work to do on these aggregated sites and infographics that give a holistic view, but gives like a perspective to a specific kind of type of people who are looking to be that core, but as the core is larger. When you mentioned core contributors at the beginning, you mentioned like the SingularityNET Foundation team doing the spin-off, but I also see people who are coming from outside, like the core goal of decentralization. And it doesn't matter if it's SingularityNET, it's just SingularityNET is working on decentralization. And then those people coming from different blockchain companies or like environments, having that kind of, they want to be core of decentralization, and they found, okay, SingularityNET is doing, I'm going to also help them integrate myself into it to expand my decentralization of engagement in governance. So
yes,
so that's like, you need more kind of these infographics.
yes. So informationally, we're looking for more sites of information. I liked the different variants. You're looking at potentially even an educational program of sorts, which is one of the things I wanted to get into a little bit. We mentioned, like, Tommy, one of the things you mentioned there was a very ambassador-like activity in my mind, which is going and representing the network at events. Do throw out any words. This is a useful tool for capturing these things. If you need the QR code again, tell me. But if you go to menti.com and type 87300399 into your app, you can put them in. I want to spend the last 10 minutes or so digging into the role a little bit. Tommy, you mentioned there being a separation or different kinds of actors in the system. There's people in the middle, or they're people who want bounties. Very much one of the real core decentralization practices, certainly in the DAO space, is bounty-like work. It's a way to scale out the operation of an organization. If it's done well, one of the great visions of DAOs is that you can deconstruct very complex work into subtasks and stick the right pot of money on them, and they all get done in a very decentralized fashion. You can decentralize very open source, open innovation, purely through curated work. Very difficult. One of the things that I'm very passionate about seeing. But certainly if there's a finite pot of money, there's not much incentive to bring in new people, right? So there's clearly a budget that needs to scale with numbers. Otherwise, we run out of incentives for people to do. Now, I do think there's a tension here with that work needing to be what the network wants and what the quality it wants and all that sort of stuff. And that is the game, and it's not easy. But yeah, so I think these are really, really, really good words. Emissary, beautiful. Community grower, spokesperson, advocate, evangelist, knowledge sharer, connector, mentor. Fancy is a good one. But yeah, I think these are very much the kind of role. This is very much how I imagine an ambassador. If I'm the ambassador for the UK in the embassy in India or something, then I am a representative of the UK. I'm essentially an abstraction of the UK. I represent the whole of the UK by being there. So the ambassador is emissary is a really great way of putting it. Like, it's almost, you represent the whole entity, the system of SingularityNET. Now, obviously, that means you don't want to send anyone to do it, because if they go and misrepresent the network, that's a really bad thing. So there's a level of curation necessary or gating necessary on that role. Walter. Your hand's up, Walter, if you want to speak.
Yes, no, I'm just trying to formulate it tightly. the criterion you used to define as desirable number of people participating in governance. So in my experience, a majority of great participants are not huge fans of the governance mechanics and politics. And so as such, I don't think it's a good criteria. People, I think, all value positive outcomes of that, but are not really into, conflicts and tedium and so on.
Yes. You're very much articulating one of the great stresses of being a DAO infrastructure builder. I'm trying to convince people to do more governance, and people hate governance generally. And I absolutely agree with you, actually. It's not about we have these dumb metrics that become very prevalent in crypto. Number of people participating in votes as some metric of decentralization is not a good one. I agree, but it is one that people use, including increasingly regulators and the like, who want to say, yeah, okay, that's the decision. Was it done by the 12 people with the highest 12 token stakes? Do they control all the power? Do they make all the decisions? Is there genuinely thousands of people participating in this system? But I agree, and actually, there's a real desire here that I've seen to really explore reputation, role different. One of the things I'm very interested in is reputation weighted voting, having power distributed not necessarily by just token stake or even one person, one vote, but by participation, by knowledge, by meritocratic processes and things like that. So wonderful zealot. I love let's get them there. Perhaps ideally, actually, someone who's really into it. So there's another one here, which is just a quick sense check on how much support you as ambassadors you want. There's a degree of do you feel supported? Now you might feel supported, but don't want, want more. Like I don't feel supported, but I don't want it. And there's like a little secondary question of like, I just want to be left alone. Just if you feel like throwing any responses on there, just as a sense check to how much. Really, what I'm trying to get a sense of is what do you want to come in from the wider network in the ambassador program? Feel free to pick any of them. It's completely anonymous. No one's touching that one.
Nick, you mentioned legal liability of Ben, and something that some of the earlier ambassadors had discussed, and we tried getting money for talking to legal, is what's the legal liability of ambassadors as we do different things, and we have a treasury, et cetera, and we're not a DAO. There's no legal structure over us. Though I think Ben had said something about, well, the foundation would protect you. But when you ask the question of being supported, are we?
I mean, this is, I think you're not a formal DAO yet, but that might be where we want to take this, right? And there is questions around, there have been legal cases recently where participants in DAOs have been at risk. There is a letter of the law at the moment forming in the United States that basically says that as a token voter in a DAO, even that you can be held jointly and severably liable for the whole DAO. So yeah, it's tricky and it's a fluid legal situation. And I think there is certainly part of the process in our framework that I suggested we've got legal structure as one of the identifiers, and that's certainly one of the key pieces. So I think that's part of the question. We can dive into that more in another session, I think. Largely what you're looking for is this a regulated activity? What you're doing here is not a regulated activity. You are brokering work amongst yourselves and essentially doing things like what all of your work group activities that you've identified, not regulated activity, selling derivative products, regulated activity, things like privacy technology that allows people to hide money, regulated activity. What we're doing here is very much on the low risk category, but if someone does get a bounty some way or creates a bounty that just somehow is bad at some point and there isn't the right processes to step in the way of it, could be a problem. So definitely something that I think there should be support for in the future, and it's very much part of the blueprint in scope for me and making sure everyone is appropriately safe and supported. So yeah, that's nice. Everyone feels rather supported. I get the sense that you all support each other rather a lot, which is actually wonderful, and which is one of the reasons why I think this is one of the most coherent communities in crypto. Right in the middle on, I want more support, which means some of you do, some of you don't, or depends on what it is, maybe. Some of you want to be left alone, some of you don't. I think we're amenable to a little bit more work. I just want to finish on this. We've hit the time. Now, largely because I want to leave you with this question. And I think maybe we pick this up and do a whole session on it next time. Grace and I are very interested in reputation systems in crypto. Daniel is as well, indeed. In fact, everyone who's into DAOs and decentralization is starting to get very interested in reputation systems and ways in which that you can reify role structures. Because it's the way in which that you can elevate voting rights, give responsibilities for particular tasks. Web3 technology is very good at very granular control systems. So what I'm interested in is there's a protocol out there called HATS. Grace and I are big fans of it, which is like it's called HATS protocol. And basically you get a little NFT in your wallet that says, I'm wearing the, could be the ambassador hat. And that gives you the rights to do something. Now, what does it give you the rights to do? Maybe it's post in the Discord. That's one of the very easy things you can do. It's, you can ascribe roles to it. But yeah, what are the things that might turn into hats that you could wear in the decentralized organization? Do throw any in at this point if you want to think, but I think this is kind of like maybe perhaps homework for you to think about for the next session. I put very crude ones. Yes, Grace.
Is that more like not what skills you have, but what skills do you want to have recognized, maybe?
That's like a good way of
you would want
it.
to, like that you would want to be able to like have a hat that recognizes this ambassador as good. That's different than like, you should be nice or something. It's like, oh, we want to have us. It's more like what kinds of badges, right?
I think
like,
it's a supplemental question. I think that's the question. If you make a note of that, Grace, that's exactly the question we'll start the next chat on. But yeah, that's a very good way of putting what skills do you want to have recognized is what we can do with decentralized technologies. Walter, then Tommy, and then we'll get close to wrapping up.
What gets recognized plays hugely into the participant side of this equation, which is like the rewards, what people value. It's amazing, but what for some people would be a great reward, for others would be almost like an insult. Like one lady once said, I don't need any more, flowers. Give me, a shopping gift card. This is from a non-cost-based nonprofit. And like, to me, it's the other, well, not like I want flowers, but I don't want a, give me an Amazon gift card, right? So what people actually want and recognize as a positive, like you don't want to give rewards that people will actually perceive as a negative. And so basically, yeah, self-selecting your rewards.
Yes. And I think there's, the recognition piece here. I think it's, there's a really interesting piece around the economics of this system. And it doesn't necessarily all need need to be financial. But there's I think there's a whole piece I'd love to get into there with you at some point in the future as well. I know there's I'm incredibly impressed with the Treasury DApp and the mechanisms around the Treasury and stuff. The fact that you bootstrap this together is great. I think what we're slightly away from the kind of what rewarded is for what. I think more into what actions or roles or ways in which we can separate action within the system is what we're looking for. What would you like to have recognized? So awareness of the ecosystem is something that we could have recognized, for example. So your ability to answer a series of questions on SingularityNET could get you a recognition in digital form via verifiable credential or an SBT or something like that. Tommy.
Yeah, that's the rewards, the hats. Awesome suggestion. We've done something similar to that within the ambassador program. Some of us have the ambassador NFT. Some have the video work group ability. They've been rated for that. Some have work group ability. So those are recognitions. Treasury does have we have tokens that we give out for people that are involved time-wise, which is building reputation. And I think in deep funding, we've had a project that's working on the reputational score. In Education and Ambassador Guild, we are currently and been working on it for, I think, 6 months now, an ambassador certification program, which is a 3-phase program of infographic, video, a quiz, and actually 4 stages. Then it'll be a comprehensive test. And you have to go through this in order to get certified as an ambassador. And that's more for external. And it has to do with infographics and videos on every one of our official spin-offs. Simply who, what, when, where, why, how, what the tokens are. And it gives a standing capability for external ambassadors to talk intelligently on all the spin-off projects. So if you're going to a show, if you're going to an X Space or an AMA, you're certified, and you hopefully can intelligently talk on those spin-offs. The goal for that when we started it was end of Q1, and we're getting close to it. And we're about 90% there. So that'll be a hat or whatever you want to call it, or some type of NFT that the ambassadors will get for certification purposes.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I'd love to learn more about that practices that's already happened. And I think part of the Blueprint activity will be exploring the tooling that you would need to extend that activity and deepen it. What I'm picking up here is that there's a lot of stuff here, a polymath, AI expert, DES support, awareness of the ecosystem. This is not a trivial role. I think this is quite an important role in the ecosystem. And I think it's a high bar for anyone who there's an onboarding space, let's say, that I think there needs to be a lot lower barriers up to this. I think the ambassador is an incredibly crucial role. And is it all of these things? Leadership and unleadership, I like. Knowledge management, you need to be post-ego death. All of these, you need to be a kind of superhero, right? So yeah, I'm keen to we'll pick up this work next time. What I'll do is find a way to I'll in fact share that document with you, the Google Sheet here, for you to just play around with. Feel free to duplicate it, edit it. I'll put unrestricted editing rights on it. I'll trust you not to just obliterate it to 0. But feel free to play around with that and develop it yourselves or think about it. And I think we should pick this conversation up again because I really enjoyed it.